So, I've gotten a couple requests by very passionate people to make a video about Elven Ring, and no, I definitely didn't steal this joke from Killian. I couldn't get the full version because I'm too poor and didn't have the disk space to pirate— oh, wait, I don't think I should say that on YouTube. Here's an unrelated image of a ship from Empire Total War. Either way, I don't really think this version cuts it on anything big, and I doubt that I'm really missing out on much. I, for one, couldn't think of a better, more topical time to cover this 8-year-old DLC in a franchise that's never getting a new game. Well, in truth, while I did originally intend to focus solely on the Bright Lord DLC for Shadow of Mordor, I do kind of want to talk about it in relation to Shadow of War and all of the DLC for that game too. It's strange. The Bright Lord DLC for Shadow of Mordor ended up kind of moonlighting as a prequel to the second proper entry. The first game was a little bit confused and didn't really know if it wanted to be an Assassin's Creed clone with some of the best animation work in the entire industry, even down to the weird ghost thing, or something else. And the second game was a lot more focused and took the orc branding mechanic and made it into a mainline feature which the entire game and plot revolved around. The Bright Lord DLC shares not only the second game's focus on Celebrimbor, even down to his titular title as the Bright Lord, but also the second game's focus on branding. Let me give a little bit of an overview on the base mechanics used in this DLC which are inherited from Shadow of Mordor. Both of these games use the Nemesis system, which generates enemies from an assload of possibilities and creates dynamic nemesis, hence the name, through your interactions with them. Then, Warner Bros. Patented the system because they love stifling creative freedom. Fuck these guys. If orcs manage to kill you, they get promoted to captain alongside a bunch of randomly generated orcs. If they manage to kill you enough, they can become a war chief or a bodyguard to one, and there are 5 of these in total. In my personal experience, dying is kind of an insanely rare experience. Unfortunately, the game's entire bit only properly functions if you don't know what you're doing and lose often, which tend to stop happening after a pretty small amount of time. Kind of similar to Darkest Dungeon, once you realize the entire game's balance is built around you not adapting to or building for challenges, the Nemesis system falls apart in the sense that you don't really end up building a true Nemesis, but just wading through a lot of orcs, who, to their credit, are very different from one another, at least in the way that they look. Gameplay-wise, they're still pretty much all the same, you just have different solutions that you use on different ones. In Shadow of Mordor, at least— did I really just say Shadow of Mordor? Jesus, what's wrong with me? In Shadow of Mordor, the solution to killing every captain and war chief is just to brand a shitload of orcs and then watch the ensuing pit fight. In the sequel, the damage of followers is so abysmal that they just become set dressing and you might as well just drop the branding upgrade entirely. Coming from someone who shoves converts into every build, that is a scathing review. Speaking on the differences between the two games, I truly wish there was some way to skip dialogue or orc-related events in general. Shadow of Mordor had pretty one-dimensional orcs who were very samey, yes, but at least they got to the goddamn point and didn't waste your time. They interrupt combat for like 3 seconds, and then you're right back to it.
Fire Mountain bring doom! Doom to all men!
The orcs in Shadow of War are a lot more diverse with agendas and goals for them to have, and their introductions and lines they have are way, way longer. Like 10 to 20 seconds.
See these boys I've got standing with me? They're gonna slash you to pieces. It'll be a beautiful sight. I just wish there was more of you to go around for all of us.
And you have to fight like 12 of these guys per siege.
You meat, I devour. I'm gonna smash ya until there's just guts and goo.
Your tricks won't save you today. Stop wasting time. Let's kill him.
Oh yeah, if orcs die, they also completely interrupt all gameplay for like 7 seconds. Why? Gameplay gets interrupted with the same level of consistency that Super Mario Bros. 2 wins Game of the Year. God, I love getting sidetracked. Back on topic, overall, the Bright Lord DLC is extremely short. You brand all 5 war chiefs and then take on Sauron in some random dingy village. I assume this fight is meant to be an incredibly low-budget rendition of this cutscene, as Celebrimbor managed to lose in the exact same way and ends up in the same place in the same cutscene. The fight is pretty bad. You pretty much just whack the one ring on, and then you smash your execute key like Putin into Sauron's face over and over again until Celebrimbor just whoops that shit right into Mordekaiser's hand. In an absolutely gigabrain decision, they decided to not have the war chiefs in this DLC be randomly generated. And you know why? So that they could look consistent with this pre-rendered cutscene that they're in for about 2 seconds. Genius. This is so baffling because the randomization is literally the entire point of the Nemesis system. But this DLC managed to show exactly where Shadow of War would be going, even down to the name itself. Take a guess at what orc call you in that game.
I serve you, Bright Lord.
They also introduced mechanics in this DLC which would show up in the sequel, most namely being shadow and ground branding. I will tell you now that I'm no scholar when it comes to Lord of the Rings lore. I'm roughly familiar with it largely because it's literally the entire reason fantasy as a genre exists, and because I've played both of these games to death. I will tell you flat out now that Shadow of Mordor does not have 100 hours worth of content in it. Talion's character is very, very one note in the first game, but gets way, way more interesting in Shadow of War. His wife gets butchered in literally the first 5 minutes of the game, and his motivation starts off as "please God let me die," and then through his travels with the elf femboy and his greater understandings of Mordecai's plans, it becomes "please God let me fight an endless war against Sauron while I slowly decay into a wraith destined to serve him." It's genuinely a very tragic character arc and becomes one of the best in, like, any game I've ever played. The delivery from Troy Baker as Talion and Alistair Duncan as Celebrimbor absolutely fucking carries their characters. I could listen to Celebrimbor's sociopathic plans for revenge for hours on end and it would genuinely never get boring.
You acted too hastily. There's much we could have learned.
He slaughtered my entire family before my very eyes. What would you have done?
And while the voice filter certainly helps, it's not carrying his performance by any means. With or without it, he still sounds menacing as all hell.
Do not resist! Suffer me now! Suffer me now! Forfeit your mind! Forfeit your mind!
His performance in the Bright Lord DLC also absolutely fucking kills it.
You know nothing of true power, Sauron. The light will always prevail. All who resist will be burnt by it. I will know victory. I will know glory. I will know revenge. And you will know subjugation by my hand. There will be no limit to my power. All will tremble before the white hand of Mordor.
His casting as Celebrimbor is absolutely perfect. It's genuinely amazing how well he fits into the role. I can't even explain with words. Just listen to this guy.
For fighting this pitiful enemy, the Dark Lord promised mercy. Gaze now upon the Bright Lord. I make no such offer! Run to your master and give him this message. I come for him! This fortress is once again under my command. An attempted rebellion has been put down. Its conspirators have been put to the sword. Its leader will soon suffer the same fate. You now hold this fortress for the Bright Lord! Here, my enemies will find no weakness, no mercy, only the unassailable strength of my army! Sauron's army advances, ready to butcher every last one of us! But we will not die under his rule. We do not serve the Dark Lord! We will sally forth on the battlefield and take this land for our own! You fight for Mordor! You fight for the Bright Lord! Charge!
Okay, I'm sorry, I need to bring this up. I've been hung up on this for 5 years now. Before Shadow of War released, they released this story trailer which included that speech that I just showed you. To try to shorten his speech just a little bit, they tried mixing some of Celebrimbor's voice lines and fucked it up really badly. Take a listen.
We will take this land for our own! We will sally forth on the battlefield and take this land for our own!
In truth, a lot of the DLC produced for both of these games is not fit for them at all. Small story campaigns really do not fit in with the type of game that this is, completely built on the foundation of its random elements. It's kinda like adding a story mode to Minecraft. Eltariel's DLC is really bad, and at least 95% of its awfulness is contributed by Eltariel herself being an unsympathetic and unlikable character put next to one that is. You can have media focus on unlikable characters and have it be great, but when you put this elvish toaster right next to Talion, it really makes it obvious how shitty of a character she is. This DLC also has baffling audio issues. In one of the first cutscenes in the DLC, Eltariel sounds like she's recording on a laptop and they didn't even bother to remove the background noise.
It's a wonder you've been able to hold the fort as long as you have. I believe Mordor and the Nazgul must be contained. But how long can you fight this war before you fall and join them?
I don't know. So perhaps you should stay close.
Troy Baker as Talion, of course, sounds amazing, and they even managed to make him sound better and more sympathetic than the protagonist in her own DLC. In the last fight against the rogue Nazgul, the domination noise is Talion's grunt pitched up a bunch. Clearly, with the audio issues, this was pretty rushed, and I guess they couldn't afford Laura Bailey to grunt a couple times, but like, Jesus. The DLC being rushed is backed up by more than 1 or 2 audio issues isolated to this DLC. I would say that Shadow of War at large was rushed. After Celebrimbor's betrayal, obviously Talion is on his own as a lone Nazgul. You then went on to play the Shadow Wars, which took some dozen hours to complete, where you fought fortress defenses over and over. And for all those battles against hundreds of orcs, he didn't have any voice lines as Dark Talion until Eltariel's DLC was released. He just grunted at people. His voice lines that he has now are okay, but nowhere near as good as...
Abdicate your will!
In general, dropping the ability to hear Celebrimbor's voice lines after a certain point in the story was a ridiculously dumb decision. No matter how good Talion's story and delivery is, it's pretty much against the laws of physics for it to compare to...
I will not sully my blade with your cowards!
The free will that orcs have or don't have is not very well explained. In the first game, it seemed like branded orcs were all sleeper agents all the time and had no control over their actions when branded, but here they're a lot more self-conscious and some seem to be able to willingly defect to either side. There's also Ratbag in the first game. He's a hilarious Scuzzlord, so it's clear that not all orcs are lovers of Sauron and just care for their own goals.
Well done, Ranger. Now, just picture all these corpses as Goroth. Visualize your goals.
Orcs with this motive only ever show up as scripted characters in either game, it's just that they're a lot more common in Shadow of War. The natural evolution then would be have a natural disposition meter for those in the Nemesis system towards either leader. Your actions could affect how an entire tribe sees you. At best, they could either become exceptionally susceptible to branding, or are all instantly Team Talion, and at worst, they all get Iron Will. They released the Slaughter Tribe shortly after release, and that's the perfect type of thing to add more of. More variety for orcs that slots nicely into the Nemesis system. Baranor's DLC is also pretty good, though I wouldn't call it perfect. It's a roguelike, which is good as it helps play with the randomly generated orcs some more, but is bad in that you don't have enough time to form a relationship with any of them because they're all gone if you die. Monolith are unfortunately working on a Wonder Woman game now, which is a little bit of a shame as I'd love to have seen a third entry in the series. That being said, the Eltariel DLC teases a sequel, which I am glad we didn't get because having to spend more time with her would not have been enjoyable. What I'd like to have seen is a complete role reversal. Baranor's DLC has human mercenaries which have the Nemesis system applied to them, and you use them to fight orcs. I'd have liked to play as Nazgul Talion backed up with his army of orcs conquering the realms of men, dwarves, and elves. Would it have fit with the canon? No, probably not. Would I have given a shit? Absolutely not. This would admittedly be an insanely ambitious project that would require an insanely long in development time, so maybe they're actually making this game? Oh look, my drum of copium just ran out. Oh well.
How are we to defeat the Moon Lord's forces if you're not even properly equipped?
I like my cobalt shield and I like my glow in a bowl. That's better. I don't need any more items than that.
Talion, how is your defense so low? Please tell me you equipped your armor into the proper slot.
Vanity slot, of course. It does the same as the normal slot